to recover the greatness of antiquity, one of the sources that they were concerned about studying afresh was the Scripture, particularly the New Testament. And so there's a whole new accent on mastering the biblical languages, which brought in its wake a new investigation of the original sources of Christian thought. And at first that was somewhat tame, but after a while there were those who saw a radical dichotomy between what they were reading in the original sources of Scripture and what had developed historically in the institutional church that was based more on tradition than on the original source. So the first challenge really that came to the medieval synthesis, or what we call the classical synthesis, was the challenge brought by the Renaissance. This were the initial movements that were going sooner or later to displace the original, or the medieval structure of the university, where it was commonplace to think in the university that the queen of all of the sciences was theology, and philosophy was called her handmaiden. So that the theological faculty would be the dominant faculty of the entire university. And then second, perhaps in command, was the Department of Philosophy. Well, as you know today, that's not the way it is, and some radical changes were already starting to take place as a result of the impetus of the Renaissance. Also at this time, as part of the Renaissance mindset, was a challenge to teleology. I remember when I was a senior in college, I still had not yet taken my required course in freshman biology. The reason for that was scheduling. When I was a freshman, I took Greek, and the only time I could take Greek conflicted when the courses were offered for what they called bonehead biology, Biology 101. And so I didn't take it until I was a senior. I'd been a philosophy major and all of that sort of thing. And I remember the first day in class, the biology professor said something that disturbed me greatly. In her opening lecture, she said, "You must learn, if you're going to be scientific and to engage in the pursuit of the knowledge of living things, as we're doing in biology, is that you have to set aside any concerns of teleology." And I said, wait a minute. That's like telling me I can never ask the question, what is the purpose of these things that we're studying? And I had problems with that, philosophical problems and theological problems. What I didn't realize was that she was merely reflecting an attitude towards science that had been deeply rooted already in the Renaissance. The Renaissance reacted against the medieval education's fixation, they believed, on trying to interpret everything that we learn in this world according to how it fit with the divine plan and the divine purpose. You think God was banished from the schoolroom only in the 20th century. But this challenge was that we are to study things for their own sake and not to be concerned about how they fit in with the ultimate purposes of God and so on. This was a serious challenge to Christian thinking because the Christian worldview was such that wanted to understand everything that we learn in light of its relationship to the purposes of God. Now, a second major challenge to the medieval realm was the scientific revolution that came in the 15th and 16th century. Particularly, as you've all heard, the Copernican revolution, where the astronomer Copernicus wrote a theory that attacked the traditional theory of the Ptolemaic view of the universe, where the ancient Ptolemy taught, in the Aristotelian tradition, that the Earth is the center of the universe and the center of our solar system. That was called geocentricity. And over against geocentricity, geo is the Greek word from we get from geis, which means earth. The earth is the center of the solar system. Copernicus, arguing for mathematics and so on, argued for heliocentricity. He did this basically on the research of Kepler and others and the mathematical considerations to save the phenomena as Plato had urged. He just said that the whole paradigm of considering the sun as being the center of the solar system rather than the earth just made a whole lot more sense. Well, this created a major controversy in the 16th century over the authority of the church. The authority of the church was being challenged because the church had embraced the Ptolemaic view of the universe, believing that the Bible taught that the earth was the center of the universe. We know the famous Galileo episode where Galileo was condemned when the bishop of the church refused to even look through his telescope to see if there would be corroborative, confirming evidence of heliocentricity. If you read the writings of Luther and Calvin on the Protestant side, both Luther and Calvin vehemently castigated the thinking of just about everybody in the church. Protestant and Catholic alike at that time saw a significant challenge to historic Christianity by the new science. Now, the new science came being born on the wings of two important developments. One was a new scientific method, the scientific method that you learned when you went to grade school. The scientific method that is based upon two elements, the element of induction and the element induction when you gather data, when you collect samples, when you conduct experiments. And then deduction has to do with the reasoning from the data that you have collected. And so the scientific method was not satisfied with discovering truth simply by philosophical reflection or by theological dogma, but rather they wanted to look at the facts. They wanted to examine the earth as it is discoverable to whatever level it is and so on. But in addition to this method, and also add that in the deduction side, math and mathematicians were growing in importance in this period, as we will see. But in addition to this, there was an explosion of technology. There was a real technological revolution that took place at this time. And it was an explosion of technology of instruments, particularly instruments of measurement, the development of the microscope, the development of the telescope. Two very important historical discoveries. Because now our ability to see and perceive the external world was enhanced by a virtual quantum leap. The telescope means to look across or look far, and greatly enhanced our ability to see into the far distances of the heavens. In addition, that which was tiny, so small that could not be perceived by the naked eye, was now suddenly open to our vista by virtue of the microscope. And people were discovering microorganisms and molecules and bacteria and all that sort of thing, which just radically revolutionized the entire scientific world. Now, in addition to the changes and advances in science, one of the things that came in its wake was the age of exploration. And this was enhanced by these new instruments. This was the period of vast worldwide exploration by Vasco da Gama and Magellan and Christopher Columbus in the 15th century and so on. In fact, Columbus's discovery of America was a discovery of a new world, which changed the whole dynamic of changes were taking place. There were also changes in business and commerce, and as the changes came in business and commerce, came changes in economics. In fact, probably the most significant single change in the realm of economics was with the use of money. Now, there's always been money. Well, there's been some medium of exchange, but still, the guilds and the economic system of the Middle Ages functioned basically on the basis of exchange of goods and services, where money was not conceived of as a commodity. But with the birth of what we call capitalism, everything changed. Because now money was seen as something that had inherent value and could grow and make a person wealthy by investment. And one of the most favorable investments that came about at this time was the investment in exploration ventures. Remember when you were in junior high school about Columbus trying desperately to get finances to test his theories of finding a shorter way to the East Indies for commercial reasons?